Hello, everyone. My name is Rusty Ford, and if you've seen any of my videos, you're probably familiar with the fact that I am really interested in suicide prevention. I've had family members and friends in their life with suicide, and I'm doing everything I can to help train and educate people so that they know how to share with people, know how to recognize the signs of suicide. But one of the things that can hinder you from recognizing the signs of suicide is believing various myths. This video is called Suicide Myth versus Facts, the 10 most common serious myths about suicide. There are a lot of myths out there about suicide. One of the common ones that doesn't hinder suicide prevention in any way is that most suicides happen around the holidays. And it's simply not true. Most suicides happen in the springtime. But whether you believe it or not, it's not going to keep you from reaching out to a friend who might be suicidal. But some of these others can hinder your ability to recognize that somebody might be suicidal and somebody might need your help. And so I want to share with you these 10 because of the seriousness of how they can affect uh, the world and and the world as far as suicide prevention is concerned. Second, myth number one, and this is one of the most common and dangerous myths I know of, and that's the belief that people who talk about suicide seldom attempt or die by suicide. It's dangerous because most people who talk about suicide are reaching out. They're looking for help. Most people who are suicidal do not want to die. They want to end the pain and they don't know how. And so when they are talking about suicide or they're talking about hopelessness, they're reaching out. It's their way of shouting, "Help me." And if you believe that, they bring the subject up that they're not going to do it, then you're not going to take it seriously. You're not going to recognize that this person may be wanting to end their life. And so let's get solid in our mind that if somebody's talking about suicide, we need to take it seriously. Number two, asking about suicide will put the thought in their head. Both this one and the one previous are so common that when I bring these up in my trainings, you can see people raising their head, shaking their head, and then are shocked to find out that what they have thought was true is not. But this concept has been studied for years, and all the research has shown the same thing. Every single one, without exception, in hundreds of studies, that mentioning or asking somebody about suicide is not going to put it in their head. The reason being is, you know, they don't have to have you put it in their head. Everybody knows about suicide. Everybody's heard about suicide. And your mentioning is not going to go, "Oh, gee, that's the answer." It's just not going to happen. Most people who are thinking about suicide appreciate that someone cares enough to ask and open a dialogue that can lead them into getting the help that they need. I've never met one person, and I've asked, it may be over 100 people now that I've asked, "Are you thinking about suicide?" And not one of them has ever been offended. Now, there's a way I do it, and I'll share that real quickly with here. When I notice some sign, something that suggests that you may be suicidal, I'll say, "Oh, somebody who's thinking this way or somebody who is doing this, oftentimes they're thinking about suicide. Are you thinking about suicide?" You know, uh, and most people are they they really do appreciate the fact that you care enough to ask. I know it's not an easy subject to bring up, but if you have this idea that asking them will put the idea in their head, no matter how uh, open they are or what they do or say to you to suggest uh, that they're suicidal, you won't take the time to ask them because you'll be too afraid that you'll be putting the idea in their head. And so I want you to understand that it's been studied to death, and the fact is you're not going to do it, or you're not going to put the idea in their head. The third one is suicide attempts or deaths happen without warning. Research among people who have attempted suicide show that most people feel that they believe they had made it obvious to multiple people that they were thinking about suicide, though they seldom put it plainly in their words. I mean, they don't look at you and say, I'm thinking about suicide. While it does happen without warning sometimes a tragedy happens and it just pushes somebody over the edge. But most of the time, there are warning signs, and people just did not recognize them. You, uh, I've seen so many studies and interviews of people, and they are they're just dumbfounded that people didn't know that they were suicidal. They thought they had made it clear, but understand they don't just walk up and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about suicide," and that's where you go through the training and learn the signs. But most of the time, it doesn't happen without warning. And if you believe that suicides always happen without warning, you'll miss the signs that a friend or a loved one is giving you. Myth number 4. It's a common myth that if a person lives through a suicide attempt, they will not do it again. Uh, yeah, I'm surprised at the number of people I meet that believe that, but the opposite is true. Uh, when you look at any list of signs that somebody might be suicidal, every single one of them, I don't know that I've ever seen one that didn't say a previous suicide attempt. Once you've tried before, it's easier to do it again. And the studies have shown that when a person tries the second time, they use a more lethal means. And if they go to a third, every time they try it, it's a more serious and more dangerous way of doing it. So if you have this idea that, oh, they tried, they're not going to do it again, when they start sharing things that should signal to you that you're thinking that, well, that they're thinking about suicide, you'll miss it. And that's why this one is a serious and dangerous myth. Myth number 5, people who threaten suicide are just seeking attention. This can occasionally be true. The guy whose girlfriend or vice versa just broke up with them that says, if you don't come back to me, I'll end my life. Well, you know, I know a lot of people have thought that that was just seeking attention until the person ended up, you know, uh, either ending their life or making an attempt. We should take them all seriously. You know, uh, unless the person has a long history of just doing it. But even then, I will never, ever, under any circumstance, take any suggestion that a person makes that they may end their life as attention seeking. I'm going to take it seriously. I'm not going to let it manipulate me. And if a person's doing it to try and change my behavior, that's not going to work. But I'm just not going to say, oh, they're just seeking attention. Myth number 6, if a person has decided to end their life, there's nothing we can do to prevent it. Well, the truth is many suicides not only can be prevented, but every year tens of thousands of suicides are prevented. Yes, there are some people who've made up their mind and there's little we can do, but most people who are thinking about suicide do not want to die. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The studies have shown that. And I've personally worked with a number of people who were suicidal, planning on ending their life, and are now living a happy, full life because of that intervention. The team of people I work with, they've all seen it happen. The crisis call centers take in tens of thousands of calls a year, and some of those people end up ending their life anyway. But the majority of them don't. The intervention takes place, they start getting the help they need, and then they are able to move forward and live a happy and full life. But it's dangerous because if you believe that there's nothing you can do, then you won't end up doing anything about it when you suspect that they are suicidal. Myth number 7, only certain types of people can become suicidal. No, that's simply not true. Anybody, just about anybody, can become suicidal. How do I know? Is I never had a suicidal thought. until I developed depression. And then, I had depression for 10 years and never had a suicidal thought, and thought that I could never become suicidal. I had so much to live for: wonderful wife, wonderful children, strong faith. And it was possible for me to become suicidal until I did. And you know, um, and some of the little things associated with this: many people believe that only people with mental illness or people in difficult situations will become suicidal. Well, only about 70% of people who end their life with suicide have, any diagnosable mental health condition. And it's dangerous because if you don't think your friend suffers from a mental health condition, you'll miss it when they're sharing that they're suicidal. And a lot of people tend to want to associate groups, the poor, people who are destitute, wealthy. Some people have heard that, dentists, you know, uh, and CEOs have some of the highest suicide rates. Some people believe that people who have everything that they want won't commit suicide, but suicide is no respecter of persons. Mental illness is no respecter of persons. Deep emotional pain shows no boundaries. So, if you only think that these people over here can commit suicide and your friend or your family member is not part of that group, then you just very well may miss their pleas for help. Myth number 8: people who end their life have depression or other mental health condition. Well, I kind of hit on that. You know, and I only 90% of the people who end their life with suicide show symptoms of depression or mental health issues, and only 45 have a percent have a mental health diagnosis. So just because somebody uh, you know has a mental health condition or suffers depression or anxiety, you or just because somebody doesn't mean that they won't be suicidal. So I bring this up because, again, if you believe that only people who show strong symptoms of depression or mental health issues will end their life, you may miss it when your family member or your loved one uh, has moved into that position and is thinking about ending their life, and you just don't see it because well, they're not depressed, so they're not going to do it. You don't want to have anything in your mind that will hinder you from being there to help a loved one when they're moving into mental health crisis. Myth number 9: sudden improvement in one's mental state means that they have moved outside of suicide crisis. We use the term suicide crisis or mental health crisis when talking about somebody who is thinking about suicide, especially if they're seriously thinking about suicide. Um, the sad thing is the exact opposite is true. Many people who are thinking about suicide will perk up when they have made the decision to act on their suicidal thoughts because they feel they have found a way to end their pain. They're suffering, and tomorrow they're going to end their life and their suffering will be over. And so suddenly they perk up. And so, and this could be, the day before, or this could be, a month before, but just because somebody's mood improves doesn't mean that, they're no longer suicidal. And it also could be that they have something like bipolar. And just because you've seen them in this strong depressive state and they're talking about suicide, if they swing toward the manic side, they won't seem suicidal. They won't seem sad for that period of time. But if you've got bipolar, what goes up must come down, and you've had that swing up, and then that phase ends and you swing back down in depression and you're suicidal again. So don't be confused if you think somebody's suicidal or you've talked to them and they are and they suddenly improve. Don't assume that the crisis is over. And myth number 10: once somebody is suicidal, they will always be suicidal. Well, this was not so dangerous because if you expect them to always be suicidal, you may be watching them closely to try and make sure that they get the help that they need or they don't end their life. But uh, the truth is, most people who consider suicide only do so for a limited amount of time. And given the proper help and support, they get past this and they go on and live a full and happy life. And I want to end with that one. If you do have any comments, you're welcome to make those comments, whether it's a, a myth that you have that you think is serious, or any myth that you have about suicide, you can comment on. Uh, if you have questions about any one of these 10s, you can make a comment and ask a question. I will, you know, see every comment, and I will reply. Other people who work in the area may see the reply and comment as well. And so I wish you all a full and happy life. And let's take suicide seriously and help everyone we know and love them with a great big love.